Here are some essential phrases to help you become fluent in IELTS speaking. Hello, this is Keith from English Speaking Success and the website The Keith Speaking Academy. Now, to speak fluently in English and IELTS speaking, you need to learn the vocabulary and the grammar and then practice so you can be flexible and respond quickly to questions. Oh yes, and you must never give up. Keep practicing, but you also need coherence. What? Coherence. Coherence, right, is the smooth flow of your ideas, where your sentences are connected to each other and they flow smoothly. So the listener or the examiner finds it easy to follow what you're saying. This will include signposts, telling the listener where you're going. I'm going to talk about this or this. It will include connectors, which are like bridges connecting your sentences. Come with me, follow me over the bridge. And also fillers, which help you control the pace of your speech. So in this video, I'm going to give you some really good phrases. Signposts, right, to begin speaking. Signpost to generalize. And signpost to talk in details or give details and examples. As well as connectors to connect your sentences and some great fillers as well. And as a bonus at the end of the video, I'm going to give you some phrases for a skill that almost no teachers are talking about, even though it appears in the band descriptors. And if you don't do this, you won't get a band 7 or above. Find out more about that towards the end of the video. Right now, let's jump in with some signposts. Yo! Okay, let's look at some nice phrases to begin your answer. Now, I'm looking here particularly at the part 2 question, where you have to give a longer turn. Really important that you begin very clearly, very directly with a nice start, right? So what you don't want to do, well, let's take the question, right? For example, describe a person you admire. What you don't want to do is something like this. Yes, admiration is a great human quality. It is important for us to look up to people, especially elderly people, because admiration can help because that's going to totally confuse the examiner. What are you talking about? Admiration? Quality? Human? I've asked you to describe a person. Right? It's going to be confusing. The signposts are not clear. Much better signposts will be something like this. I'm going to tell you about my uncle. I'd like to kick off by telling you about his job. Great. I'm going to tell you about this person. Very clear. And I'd like to kick off by telling you about some aspect, maybe their personality, their job, how you knew them, and so on. We could also try something like this. I'm going to tell you about my uncle. To start with, let me tell you about his job. So this time we use to start with, let me tell you about his something, right? Okay, lovely. In addition, we could also say something like, the person I want to talk about is my uncle, my mother, my father. Or the person I want to talk about is none other than my uncle. That's a nice expression, none other than. We use that often when we're going to say something that may surprise the examiner. Now, because the examiner doesn't know you, it's easy to surprise them. So you could always say that, right? The person I'm going to talk about is none other than my brother. So it's a good idea to be direct. In fact, you can even say you're going to be direct. Something like, getting to the point The person I want to talk about is my uncle. And then you begin. Lovely. Now, in part 3 of IELTS speaking, very often we have to generalize, making these broad assumptions or giving general ideas about things, often quite abstract, right? For example, let's take a question. Is it easy for older people to change? Here, we're going to say something quite general, right? We might want to say something like, by and large, I'd say, overall, it seems to me that I tend to think that. Let's have a look at these in action. By and large, I'd say it's harder for them because they're often stuck in their ways. Overall, it seems to me that it's harder for them because they're often stuck in their ways. I tend to think that it's harder for them because they tend to be stuck in their ways. Great, let's go now from the general to the detailed and giving examples. Now, in your IELTS speaking part 3, in your answers, it's a good strategy to talk generally and then give examples. Be more specific, right? This helps you develop your answer and, will help you show off a wider range of language. Let's take some examples. Imagine the question, how do you think people could become healthier? That's the question. Of course, you can say, for example, or for instance, right? But here are some more creative ways of saying it. To share one example with you, to name one example, more specifically, in particular. Now, let's have a look at these in the same answer, but using these different phrases. I think there's a bunch of things people could do to get into shape. To share one example with you, they could go for a brisk walk first thing in the morning. I think there's a bunch of things people could do to get into shape. To name one example, they could go for a brisk walk first thing in the morning. I think there's a bunch of things people could do to get into shape. More specifically, they could go for a brisk walk first thing in the morning. I think there's a bunch of things people could do to get into shape. In particular, they could go for a brisk walk first thing in the morning. Let's move on. Now, the most common connectors in natural spoken English are and, but, so. And it's perfectly fine to use these, so ignore any YouTube teachers who tell you don't say and, because it's fine to say and, really, and but, and so. And there are other words you can use as well, right? So, in addition to and, we could say, on top of that, actually, as a matter of fact. For example, I like history. On top of that, I like geography too. I think they both overlap, to be honest. I like history. Actually, I like geography too. I think they both overlap, to be honest. I do like history. As a matter of fact, I like geography too. I think they both overlap, to be honest. Synonyms for but. You could say, that said. Notice the intonation. That said, it's a so it's a falling, rising. That said, or mind you, same intonation. Mind you, can you say that? Mind you. Lovely. For example, I like fast food. That said, I wouldn't eat it every day. I do like fast food. Mind you, I wouldn't eat it every day. Finally, with so, when it means giving a reason, right? You could say, that's the reason, or that's the reason why. For example, I love football, so I often go to watch the match live on Saturdays. I love football. That's the reason why I often go to watch the match live on Saturdays. Lovely. Let's move on to fillers. Now, fillers in English tend to be things like well, you know, and they tend to be seen as negative things. I think the problem is that they are overused, and if we overuse them, it's negative. However, these fillers are part of natural spoken English, so it's fine to use some of them. You see? The thing is, when you overuse them, I would suggest that because things like and can be confused with hesitation, which will bring down your fluency score. So a quick tip for you. If you think you're going to say then just go quiet. Say nothing. As simple as that. That will help you reduce your hesitations. What I want to look at in this video are the more complex fillers that are often used to gain time, especially in part 3, where you get those difficult questions. You need time to think, and you can take time to think. Here are some simple, well, actually not simple, complex fillers that you can use, okay? And I'll try and show you how to use them. Let's take the question. Will we use electric cars more in the future? That's a tricky question. I think we probably will, because, okay, or because it's a question about the future. You could say, that's hard to predict. That's hard to predict. To predict is to guess what's going to happen in the future, right? You could say, that's hard to predict. But I guess we probably will, because another one, I'm no expert, but I suppose we probably will use electric cars more because... And finally, one of my favourites, but you have to practice this one. So, will we use electric cars more in the future? It's funny you should ask, because I was thinking about that the other day. I think we probably will, because... Right, so you can see the phrase, the pause, to take time to think, and then you give your answer, right? Nice. Okay, now let's switch from part 3 to part 1. Part 1, you often get questions about, do you like this? Do you not like this? What's your favourite sport, hobby, drink? And of course, you could just say, well, it's basketball. Well, it's coffee, because, right? But if you want to gain a bit of time to think, and you might do, because, you know, I don't know what my favourite sport is, you could say things like the following. Talking about my favourite sport, it has to be basketball. See, I have time to think. Or, when it comes to my favourite sport, I'd say it's basketball. Finally, if I were to talk about my favourite sport, I suppose I would choose basketball. Because... and so on and so forth. Nice, okay? So these are simple and complex fillers that can help you gain time. Let's move on. Now, do you remember at the beginning of the video, I talked about a skill, the one skill and the phrases you need that almost nobody is teaching, even though it's in the band descriptors. Have a look at the band descriptors under vocabulary. Band 7 uses paraphrase effectively. Now, paraphrase, well, it has two basic different meanings, but it is so important that you can do this. First of all, it's where you rephrase the question in another way using synonyms. This is very common in IELTS writing, okay, to some extent in IELTS speaking. So if the examiner says, well, do you like history? Yes, I'm a big fan of history. Like, I'm a big fan of. I've paraphrased, okay. The second way of paraphrasing, and equally important, is when you're trying to explain something or describe something, but you don't know the words to do it. Maybe it's an unusual object and you just can't find the right vocabulary in English. What you must not do is go, oh, I don't know how to say that. No, you must find a way to express that idea with different words. That is effectively using paraphrase. Otherwise, you won't get your band 7. Ha! For example, let's say the examiner, you're talking about coffee and computers, and the examiner says, do you ever spill coffee, right? Spill coffee on your computer. And you say, no, actually, because I have one of these. But you don't know the name. And of course, in the exam, you won't have in your pocket, oh, 1 minute, yeah, I've got one of these. What? No, that doesn't happen. So you need to find a way round describing it. Listen to me explain and notice the language I use. Actually, no, I never spill coffee on my computer because I have a special thing. I don't know the specific name of it. I'm not quite sure what it's called, but it's basically, it's made out of plastic and it's something that I put on the table and it raises the level of the computer, similar to a car jack, and it raises it up so that the coffee can never spill on the computer. Right, now, see, I was able to describe the object, use some quite nice language, and even though I didn't know the word stand, the examiner will not mark me down because I didn't know the word stand. He will actually say, or she will say, or they will say, great, the candidate has paraphrased something they didn't know how to say, and they talked about it in a lovely way. Effective paraphrase. So some of the phrases I used were, I don't know the specific name, or I don't know the exact name. I'm not sure how you call that, or I'm not sure what you call that exactly. You can also say, it's a kind of, or it's similar to. Great. Simple phrases. Make sure you learn to paraphrase. It is so important. So there we have it. We've been looking at signposts to begin speaking, to generalize, to give details and examples. We've looked at connectors, and, but, so, and synonyms for these. We've looked at fillers to help you gain time and control of your speech, as well as the ability to paraphrase. I hope all of this is useful for you. If you've liked the video, if you have liked the video, press the subscribe button, turn on notifications. And if you want the PDF of all of these phrases so you can practice and become fluent, click on the link below in the description. You can get it for free. And I can't wait to see you in the next video. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye.